Greetings, I'm the Bulgarian Troglodyte. So today I'm gonna do a movie genre tier list. So this should be pretty fun and interesting. And this particular tier list has kind of the basic genres. So this doesn't have any subgenres, or maybe it has like a couple of subgenres, but most of these genres are the kind of big general genres, which is both a good and bad thing at the same time. I mean, it's good in a way that this would take forever if it had like all the subgenres. But there is also a reason why we do have subgenre classifications, because that makes it more easy to categorize a certain type of film or certain type of piece of art. And with some of these genres, I have like very particular preferences for certain subgenres. But in the end, I think it's better this way that there are just these general genres. And again, my taste in film and in different genres has changed and developed a lot throughout my life. Some of these genres I loved as when I was younger and maybe don't as much now. And then maybe some genres I didn't like as much when I was younger, but like way more now. And that's of course I think a natural thing as you grow older and you become like a more experienced cinephile. You watch more and more films, and as I try to watch kind of all types of films, especially now in my adult years. Yeah, but we'll see how this goes, and definitely let me know your tier list as well. I think these tiers are in alphabetical order here. We are gonna start with an action, with the action genre. It's actually a pretty hard for me to rank. Well, it would have been my favorite genre when I was like in my early teens. I used to really love action movies as a kid and like up to my early teens. But then again, I still like action films quite a bit, although there are some types of action films that I really don't like, and then there are other types that I like. So, for example, I don't usually like the very kind of self-serious action movies, and then I don't usually like the kind of special agent type of action movies like the James Bond movies or Mission Impossible movies, but then I really love the kind of buffed, kind of cheesy, homoerotic stuff like Roadhouse and yeah, the Arnold movies, some of the Stallone movies, and then I do from time to time enjoy watching some martial arts type of stuff, but I don't really enjoy watching that type of stuff like all the time. It's more like here and there throughout the year I kind of get into mood for watching like a Van Damme movie or maybe like a Chinese kung fu movie or then maybe like an Arnold movie or something like that, but I don't like watch that type of stuff all the time. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to rank now because again I enjoy many types of action movies, but then there are lots of like action movie kind of archetypes that I don't like. And then there's the fact that I used to watch action movies all the time, but now I don't watch them quite as often. So I think this has to go probably somewhere here in the middle, and I can of course kind of later on also switch some of these around if I need to. I'll put it in the uh, B tier for now, but it's probably a B or C tier, but it shouldn't go up from B. And I guess maybe I should be pretty kind of maybe tough with the S tier, that I don't put many genres in the S tier. And I'll try to kind of spread out these letters a little bit here as well. And there's also an I don't know tier here, but I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna put anything there, but we'll see. Then we have adventure, and of course adventure can kind of mix up with action, like yeah, Indiana Jones films, for example. Of course, they're adventure films, but they're also action films. And then adventure can also mix up with fantasy and history, for example. And I mean, even with some of these other genres here, of course. But I think adventure genre is something that it has lots of potential. But if I start thinking about like adventure films that I have seen in my life, there aren't that many that are great. And there will be some other genres here too that I think have lots of potential, but they don't really realize the potential. So this is actually very tough. And again, the adventure genre is something that you can kind of lump so many different things into that genre. That kind of makes this harder as well. Maybe I'll put it in the C tier. Again, if there were more great adventure films, maybe I'll put it here. But again, as my experience with the genre has been pretty poor, even though kind of on paper, I kind of like the idea of some types of adventure stories. Yeah. And then animation, it's not really a genre because, of course, you can have romance animation, comedy animation, crime animation, fantasy animation. But I love animation, especially Japanese anime. So I think I'll actually put this in the S tier because, again, animation just kind of encompasses all types of animated films, and there are so many that I love. Yeah. And I think, by the way, that I'm gonna kind of also think about TV shows here a bit. So even though again TV show like a animated TV show is of course a bit different from animated movie, but I think TV shows my kind of taste in TV show genres is very similar to my taste in TV show or movie genres. So I think I'll kind of think about TV shows here as well a little bit because with animation, for example, lots of my favorites are shows instead of movies. Then comedy next. And that's actually very interesting because there was a time in my life that I used to hate comedies, although at that time I hadn't seen that many. But I really kind of I had seen a couple of like Jim Carrey type of comedies, and I really hated that type of comedy when I was a kid and when I was a teenager. So that put me off of that genre for a long time, and I still don't really enjoy like lots of that kind of Jim Carrey, like Dumb and Dumber type of comedies a lot. But then there are many other comedies that I like romantic comedies and obviously the Big Lebowski. And then, as I have a dark and very weird sense of humor, like the funniest films to me are often films that aren't comedies, like Blue Velvet and The Shining, for example. Yeah, although I think I can't really say for a video like this that they are comedies because they aren't comedies. But yeah, it's not like my favorite genre, but there are plenty of comedies that I've enjoyed watching and plenty of comedies that have made me laugh. Although again, I just said that I'm gonna think about TV shows here too, and I'm not into comedy TV shows really. I mean, I like TV shows that have lots of comedic elements like The Sopranos and Californication. And I guess Californication is probably the closest to a kind of a comedy style show that I watch because that there the comedy element is a very strong thing, but I don't really watch those like full on comedy shows and I have no interest in that type of thing. Really, so mostly the comedies that I have watched have been like movies. Yeah, so I think I'll put it in the B tier. Yeah, it's either B or C, but probably B. Yeah. Then crime was something that I really loved up to maybe my early 20s. I'm 28 now, but then in the last few years, I've really grown tired of many kind of crime stories. Not all. Like currently, I've been rewatching Dexter TV show, for example, as I've been really loving the Dexter Resurrection show, and that's a crime story that I like. There is a one kind of particular thing that kind of makes me like that it doesn't take itself too seriously, that it has that comedic element and even a slight kind of weird kind of whimsical element in my opinion. And yeah, it's really funny. But if it was like all like gray and self-serious and stuff, yeah, I probably wouldn't like Dexter. And I really have grown tired of lots of those, for example, 70s American crime films that many people love. I used to be into that stuff more, but now I just kind of see that very gritty, realistic, brown and gray type of style, just lifeless and kind of dull and not very interesting. And those films tend to always be about like, oh, look at these cops and robbers and their masculinity and stuff, and it gets so boring so quickly. But at the same time, there are still crime style of stories that I like again the Sopranos, for example. But again, the thing with the Sopranos is that there is also that soap opera element, that family drama element, and comedic element. So that is a strong reason why I love it. If it was just about like the mobster crime stuff, I probably wouldn't like it as much. So I can like crime a lot, but it needs to be about something else too, and not just crime, usually. So I'll put it in the seat here because there are lots of crime stuff that I'm not that into anymore, even though the stuff that I'm not that into anymore, I can often tell that, oh yeah, this is like a very good example of a particular style and it's a well done story, well done movie, but it doesn't really speak to me that much anymore. But then there are certain types of crime stories again that I would put in the S tier. Then documentary is pretty interesting. Like I enjoy watching documentaries from time to time, but I actually don't watch that many documentaries. And if I want to learn about a topic, I often tend to like to learn about a topic maybe through reading some like articles or something rather than watching a feature length documentary. But at the same time, of course, I've really got a lot out of some documentaries like Showa, for example, and many others. I'll put it in the B tier maybe. Yeah. Then we have drama, and that goes to S tier. Definitely, again, probably my favorite genre, along with the one other genre that kind of relates to drama. Maybe I'll actually put it here because it's kind of makes sense to talk about them. But romance and drama, those are my favorite genres. And I've been into dramas and romance, I think, since I was a kid, through like soap operas, for example, and also some drama movies even back then. Although I think, again, as I've gotten older and older, I've just fallen in love with these genres more and more. And now I feel like there's nothing better than watching a good romance movie or a show or watching a great like slice of life drama. Or it doesn't always have to be slice of life, but lots of kind of relationship dramas I love. And yeah, and I think those types of stories that don't have like very complicated plots, but they are about drama and romance, those actually are usually the films that make me think about humanity and many other interesting themes more than most other genres. But drama and romance also work well as just pure kind of entertainment. Yeah, depending on what type of romance and what type of drama it is. And I like the kind of cheesy, syrupy romance, but I also like the things that are a bit more unconventional and the stuff that ends in tragedy. I think that can sometimes be like the most beautiful thing that you see, like a couple really love each other, but then it ends in tragedy, and then that tragedy kind of brings that emotion out even more than a happy ending would. But these are also the kind of comfort genres to me that I could watch romance and drama stuff like all day, both again in TV format, but also in the movie format. And yeah, they are just the most enjoyable genres to me. But again, also intellectually, I often get more out of like a well done drama, like a Ozu film, for example, than I get from a crime film about cops and robbers and masculinity. Yeah, so love those genres. You probably know if you watch my channel. Yeah. Then fantasy is very interesting because I actually really like fantasy stories. The problem with fantasy movies often is that there just aren't many kind of great fantasy movies, and I think sometimes like the budget can be an issue because, of course, if you want to make an epic fantasy, you usually need quite a lot of money for it, not always. And you can make great fantasy films with a small budget, like I don't know, Bresson's Lancelot du Lac, for example. And I think fantasy is a genre that you don't usually have the great directors making fantasy films, so that's one of the reasons why we don't get that many great fantasy films. But fantasy is kind of one of the genres here that I think has the most potential. And I have enjoyed many fantasy stories both in the movie and TV show format. So with TV shows, things like Game of Thrones, Merlin, and then like anime TV shows like Frieren, for example, is amazing. Yeah, just rewatch that. And with movies like the John Boorman Excalibur, that was a film that I fairly recently enjoyed a lot. Then, of course, the Lord of the Rings movies have been very important for me throughout my life, although not as much anymore. And there are things about those films that I hate, like The Hobbits. I mean, mostly Frodo. I absolutely hate Frodo. But yeah, The Hobbits kind of turn me off of like watching those films again. Yeah, and with fantasy, yeah, I like the typical kind of blueprint that yeah we have maybe dragons and magic, but then sword fights and like knights and things like that. So I like the basic stuff, but I also like the kind of the bit more kind of high concept fantasy and things like Game of Thrones, where you also have like a political element that also goes really into like human nature and politics and things like that. So, but I can also enjoy the more kind of whimsical adventure fantasy that maybe doesn't have that many interesting themes behind it. Um, Again, if we talk about the potential, I think I could even put it in the S tier, but then the reality is a bit more cream, so I think I'll have to put it in the B tier. Yeah, I haven't put anything in the A tier yet, but yeah, I think I have to put it in the B tier because in the end there just hasn't been that many great fantasy movies. By the way, shout out to Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer and Red Sonja. Yeah, history. Again, this could of course be many things. Like it could be war films, for example. We have the war genre here, but it could be many other things as well, like lots of like period pieces and biopics even kind of go into the history. And by the way, if we had biopics here, it would go to the F tier probably. Like most biopics, I hate, although most of the American ones I really hate, and some British ones as well. But yeah, sometimes you have like a proper art house director making a biopic, and those can be like absolutely amazing sometimes. So yeah, but history again, it's such a broad genre, so it's kind of hard to really say much about it because it can kind of encapsulate so many different things. So it's really hard to kind of put it in any of the tiers because it can be about so many things. But I think it's a worthwhile thing to, of course, explore like real historical events in film, whether and they don't always have to be like very accurate. Although sometimes you really want a kind of an accurate portrayal of a certain historical time or an event or a person or whatever. But sometimes you can just have like a real historical thing as a kind of as a background and then just put something uh, very fictional on top of it. Yeah. Uh, yeah, this is really hard because again, when you hear history, like it's just so many things. So where am I gonna put it? Maybe the B tier because again there are certain type of kind of historical films that I really hate, so I can't put it probably any higher than B. Then horror, kind of like with fantasy, I think adventure, for example, is a genre that I think has so much potential, but it kind of fails to live up to that potential. And I actually often like horror more in kind of other art forms. Like for example, I've enjoyed some horror in like kind of anime and manga context because I think like when you draw images, those can kind of get the horror type of aesthetic across to me better than like films, like live action films. And I also like lots of kind of horror style artwork in like album covers because I'm a metalhead. Lots of metal album covers go for a horror aesthetic. So I actually like lots of kind of horror style of imagery and lots of grotesque and macabre and that type of stuff. But in film, there are so many terrible horror films, and there aren't that many horror films that I love. There are some that I of course like, then there have been many like very mediocre ones, then there have been ones that I've hated. And it's not a genre that I watch that often because I'm not that interested in it. And the thing with horror is that you have like a few kind of archetypal stories and they keep on doing those again and again and again, like the haunted house thing, and then the vampire stuff, werewolf stuff, zombie stuff, like they keep doing the same thing again and again and again. But I think if we go to like more like very talented directors making horror, like art house directors making horror, I think it could become an S tier genre even. But currently, as it stands, there haven't been many horror films that I consider great. And throughout my life, I've still watched like quite a good chunk of horror films because I like watching them from time to time. But yeah, it's not one of my favorite genres, so I'll have to put it in the C tier probably. Yeah, I'm not sure whether anything is gonna go into the D and F because again, like I said in the beginning, there are so many like good and great films I think in most genres, so it's hard to put anything into the D and F. And again, as I also kind of try to, I also try to think about the kind of potential for all genres here a bit too. Then we have musical, and I like musicals a lot, but where do I want to put it? Yeah, I haven't really seen, I can't think of many musicals that I hate. I can mostly just think about ones that I like or love. My favorites being the Jacques Demy ones, of course. I know many people hate musicals, which I don't like really understand. I think I'm gonna put it in the A tier. Maybe that might be the only uh, genre in the A tier, although hard to say with some of these other ones yet. But yeah, I like musicals a lot, whether they are the musicals where everything is sang or whether they are the ones that have like musical numbers and then some moments where people just talk. I like kind of both types of musicals. Yeah, yeah, I like musicals a lot. Could even put it in the S tier almost, but I think A tier because I think if I consider my favorite movies, uh, at least for example, I think in the end, even though I like musicals a lot, I don't have that many musicals there. Yeah. Then mystery, and then I think maybe we put mystery and thriller kind of at the same time. And by the way, thrillers, of course, thrillers usually are kind of, yeah, crime thrillers, or sometimes you have like a horror thriller or action thriller. But I'll put it in the next to crime. Yeah, I used to really love psychological thrillers, but not as much anymore. But I can still enjoy thrillers from time to time by directors like Kiyoshi Kurosawa or Hitchcock, for example, but overall the genre doesn't interest me that much anymore. And also, I don't go for thriller films as much anymore. Yeah, there was a time in the past when it was really my one of my like absolute favorite things to watch, but and then I would have put the genre in the S tier, but now I have to put it in the C tier, probably next to crime. And again, the kind of things that I talked about with the crime genre kind of applies to thriller. I don't like the grey brown type of aesthetic usually, although again, there are exceptions and sometimes it really works for a film. Yeah. And then mystery, maybe it goes there as well. Again, there are exceptions, like of course even like the some of the David Lynch films we can consider to be mystery thrillers, and of course that I love, but then there are so many of those kind of dull, gray and brown type of mystery films. Yeah. And then sci-fi. It's kind of again another genre with fantasy and horror that I think has so much potential. But then in the end, when I think about all the sci-fi films that I have seen throughout my life, there aren't that many that I consider great or amazing. But I would love to see those like proper kind of space exploration type of movies with like lots of imagination and stuff where like people would go to different planets and maybe discover an alien species there. I would like to see that made in a very kind of serious, kind of philosophical and contemplative way. Also in a way that doesn't still take itself like too kind of self-seriously. It doesn't have to be like Nolan, that it feels like it's made by a sociopath or artificial intelligence. Yeah, films can be serious, philosophical, interesting and contemplative, but they don't have to be dull and lifeless when they do that. So I'd love to see something like Interstellar, but with more humanity and with more actual philosophy instead of pseudo philosophy. Yeah, but yeah, sci-fi. Like, of course, there are lots of, or maybe not lots of, but some like really great films. 2001: Space Odyssey, of course, Solaris, stuff like that. But then there are also lots of films that have potential. Like, for example, Alien. I think had potential, but to me, Alien is very dull. Again, I know most people disagree with that. I mean, I think all people disagree with me about that, but yeah, I think I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Yeah. Then a war, kind of hard to rank. There are lots of great war films. With war films, I tend to prefer the ones that are like very much anti-war films that focus on the horror of war and the dark side of human nature and humanity and human behavior, the human condition. And I don't really like the war films that are about heroism or brotherhood or some or things like that. I mean, I don't mind if a war film shows like some like acts of kindness or like self-sacrifice or things like that, but like I really hate when you start like glorifying the soldiers and stuff like that. Even though at the same time, of course, we should be like thankful for soldiers who beat the Nazis, for example, and stuff like that. I'm not saying that we should hate those people or anything like that, but I think with art, when we show war, we should just kind of show it as something that was a terrible tragedy for all people, whether you were on the X side or whether you were on the Y side, and we shouldn't just say that, oh, this side, like look at these heroes and these brothers on this side beating these monsters on the other side. Like I don't like that type of war stuff. And of course, most American war films are the type of stuff that I don't like. And I love the type of war films like Paths of Glory, The Human Condition, Red Angel, Army of Shadows, and stuff like that. Yeah. And the one war film with bit more kind of a, you could say, a positive look at war is like Ballad of a Soldier, that Soviet war film. That's one kind of exception to my taste in war films. Yeah. But I think war films have so much potential to again explore like very important themes that don't just relate to war, but relate to also just human nature in general and politics and philosophy, many things. And they can be good, like war stories can be like very good to kind of show the corruption in politicians, for example. And that's something that kind of goes beyond war, but war is a good example of the corruption of politicians. Yeah. there's so much to be said about war films, but I think I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Yeah, so much B and C. Yeah. And westerns, like it's a genre I have a bit mixed thoughts about. Of course, I've seen many westerns that I've liked a lot, but at the same time, I feel the genre is quite repetitive. And also, as I've gotten older, I've gotten less interested in it. Again, it's a genre that's usually about like violence and crime and money and greed. Again, like the obsession about masculinity and things like that. And those types of themes just don't interest me often, like in this forum. And like many of the comments that I talked about with like crime and thriller movies, I think kind of apply to westerns as well. So I think I'm gonna put it in the C tier as well. So nothing in the D or F. Yeah. Not any that I want to move anywhere, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. But like I said in the beginning, all genres have something great to offer and lots of bad things to offer as well. Yeah. But some genres I just enjoy watching more regularly than others. But I'm gonna keep watching films from all of these genres in the future. But it won't be kind of equally balanced between the genres. And who knows, maybe in 5 or 10 years, maybe I start liking crime films and thrillers more again. It's like I used to. And maybe I get bored of drama and romance, you never know. But I'm pretty confident that my ranking here will stay like this for at least quite a while and maybe forever. Yeah. But with some of the genres I could have also just gone or put I could have like put them in a different tier because with genres like history it's very hard to rank them. But anyway, let me know your tier list and your thoughts about these genres. Thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.